Welcome to Friday Recap, part of Christian News and Views. And let's get right into it. So let's see. On Monday, actually Monday and Tuesday, I talked to you about the meeting that took place on Monday between Russia and the United States. And it was looking at the collaborative work in science and other areas that uh, the United States envoy Woodcock was promoting. And he acted like anybody who disagreed with him was naive. Well, I took issue with that. First of all, I replied to his question. And basically, his question was who wouldn't want Russia to and the United States to be collaborating together on areas of science, economy, you name it. And you think, that would be a great world. Well, it would be if it was attained in the right way, but it's not going to happen. Um, the the view that seems to be predominant right now is that Putin can be trusted, and Trump is basing this on his own negotiations with Putin, particularly when he was president the first time. And if that's all you went by, it would really sound good. The most you can get out of that is that when he was president, Trump, who the master negotiator, was able to put the brakes on Putin. If you'll look back, you'll notice that Putin didn't really do anything during um, Trump's presidency. In fact, the brakes were completely on. But when Trump was no longer president, Putin got busy. And so people might say, why? Well, of course, the Democrats, they said, well, he was in cahoots with them. No, it wasn't any of that. Not any of that at all. What it was is that President Trump knows how to lead. He knows how to negotiate. It's sort of like the idea of there's an old saying, carry the big stick. Trump knew how to carry the big stick and just threatened to use it. And Putin respected that, and they were able to sit down at the table and negotiate. And while he was president, uh, Trump was president, Putin respected and honored all their agreements. But once President Trump was no longer in office, Putin didn't feel any obligation to Trump to carry on. He was more involved. His number one motive, in my opinion, and I'm into my opinion already here, uh, is that he wants to see Russia return to what I call, and I don't think I originated the phrase, I think somebody else did, the glory years. The glory years of the Soviet Union. And most people looking at the Soviet Union wouldn't think it was very glorious. But militarily speaking, they were one of the superpowers. They were one of the first into space. They did a lot of things, a lot of achievements. But when the Soviet Union collapsed, they no longer had a dictatorial government, and the Russian people didn't know how to handle it. They installed excuse me, they installed a democratic government and had held elections and all that, but the people they elected were former communists, and they never really escaped from um, mental uh, the mental idea of one man ruling the whole thing. No, actually, in the Soviet Union, it wasn't one man; it was one party, and that party would have one man who stood out. He dominated until he didn't, and so, sooner or later somebody would rise up in the party and they'd kick him out, kick out the old guy and put in the new guy. So Putin got elected, and when he did, he started making changes in the way the government was structured and so on and so forth. So now he's basically a dictator now. They still hold elections, but they're meaningless. And so the United States doesn't have any real connection with them like they once did. There's the democratic aspect of it is really gone for all intents and purposes. And Putin is focused on restoring the glory years of the Soviet Union. So, uh, so you might ask, why am I opposed to Russia and the U.S. doing anything collaboratively? Well, to get a world like that, I mentioned then, and I'll go over them again now, there's three things that would have to be done. First of all, we as a nation would have to leave our Christian values. The Bible consistently said we have no part in Belial, which is another term for the devil. We have no part in being in cahoots in cooperation with an enemy government. In the Old Testament, I think it was Jehoshaphat, but I'm not sure. I didn't look this up before going on the air here, so but one of the kings of Judah started cooperating with the kings of the north, which was at that time called Israel, and they actually that king almost lost his life in a battle that took place. They actually agreed. They actually had their armed forces working together, and it could have been much worse than it actually was. But he got rebuked for that by God through one of God's prophets. But the thing is that God's never really endorsed that kind of an action. And so, as a Christian nation, and by the way, we still are, we may not be what we once were. We have drifted, we've gotten away from the Bible, we've done a lot of bad things. And so we are not anywhere close to what we once were, but we are still benefiting from our Christian values that went into the government, the founding of the government in the first place. But we've left a lot of values. Some of them we left in the dust, some we've compromised. But to get to the point to be able to cooperate fully with Russia, we'd have to no longer be a Christian nation. Junk all of our Christian values, because you just can't have the two together. They're going to clash. So that's one reason. The second reason that I'm opposed to it is we would be abandoning any semblance of being a country that the rest of the world could trust. They're already asking questions and about what Trump is doing, not because they dislike Trump. They simply don't understand what he's doing, and to be in all honesty, neither do we. He's like a gambler who holds his stuff real close to the chest and doesn't reveal his plans. And I think, in my own estimation of the man, what he is doing is out of his love for America, and I believe that I'm going to take him at face value. He says he's a Christian, and he's received Christ as his Savior, and God can and does work through men and women who have once been really bad folks, and he turns their lives around. But Trump is like I've said, a master negotiator, and he is using some trump cards. Excuse the play on words, but that's what they are. They're trump cards, and he has a plan. And the best we can do is pray for that. Pray it's a good plan, and pray that it works out. So, but in the end, when somebody else comes in to take Trump's place in less than 4 years, that person is going to have to prove to the rest of the world that they are just as tough, just as wise as Trump. And that's probably debatable whether they could do that or not. They're going to certainly try, and they'll certainly advertise themselves that way. But the thing is that they're going to have a hard time working with Putin. They're going to have a hard time in guaranteeing any kind of peace agreement that is in existence. It's just hard to believe that anything like that would last beyond Trump's presidency. Now, number three, to cooperate with a government that has been on restoring the Soviet Union in essence, if not in fact, that's contrary to the very nature of the American people. The Soviet Union was evil. You don't believe me? Go back and look at how their own people lived. And by the way, they still live that way. They lived in fear too. I was talking about their economics. They didn't have economic freedom. They didn't have free enterprise. They didn't have the ability to lift themselves up by the footstraps. And while the Constitution guaranteed freedom of religion, they really didn't have that either. So, Soviet Union is evil. And Russia is only a little bit above that, or was, and now it's getting down to where the Soviet Union was, but it doesn't have the strength and the power. It needs America or somebody to bolster them. That's why they look to, before they look to America, they look to China, North Korea. China's a growing, rising country. And if Russia wants their cooperation, they have to make some sacrifices. Putin would have to sacrifice some of his authority, I would assume. But doing it with America, not necessarily so. He's treated as an equal. And so there's some plans in that. This is three things that are, in my opinion, contrary to good old-fashioned Americanism. Now, I opined that at the time that Mr. Witkoff is a naive one. He is living in a fantasy land if he thinks that Putin can be trusted. You don't have to go way far back to see that when Trump ran the country, Putin was respectful and kept his nose clean. But as soon as a new president was on scene, Putin made his move. Now, yes, Biden was a weak president, but that only made it easier for Putin. When you have a strong president and then a weak one comes into place, that opens the doors for all sorts of evil trickery, if you will. And now we got a strong president again, and he's trying to undo all the damage that Biden did, and at the same time carry on some international negotiations and everything else. So he's got a big job ahead of him. And if there's anybody around who can pull that off, I would think it would be President Trump. But I don't agree with him about Putin. He thinks that Putin still respects him. And maybe to some degree Putin does. But the United States doesn't hold all the cards that we once held. Thanks to Biden, we have a weaker military. Now Trump's trying to straighten that out. A weaker economy. Trump's trying to straighten that out, but in his process, he's got to do some severe things with the Department of Government Efficiency that is causing a lot of indecision, some panic, and so that weakens our economic position there, and it weakens our presentation to the world. Now, in the end, I think that Trump's going to succeed in what he wants to do. But he's dealing in trying to correct a situation that's been decades old. It's been under Democrat and Republican presidents that all this bad stuff has been taking place. And I don't think 4 years is going to get all cleaned up, but it might make a big dent in it. And if we get a president who follows through and has some strength to him and takes a pro-Trump stance, then I think that we will still have a heritage and still be able to present that tough persona, if you will. So, in my Tuesday talk, I mentioned America is no longer around when the book of Revelation is opened. And that, folks, is a fact you can't get around. There is no mention of America in the entire book of Revelation. In fact, there's no mention of America outright in the entire Bible. Now, there are some places where people say, well, that must refer to America. The term the young lions. Well, many people, Bible scholars, think that might refer to the Europe and the Americas, but we don't know that to be true. That's speculation. You want to call it intelligent speculation? That's fine. It's still speculation. So something happens to America, and I believe that something is the return to power of the liberals here in America, and when that happens, we may never get another chance for conservatives to take over. I think because I think that we are in the end times now. Been basically in the end times since the end of the apostles, since the last apostles passed away. All right, you could even argue since the crucifixion. But the thing is that a lot of we have some. If you're talking golf, we have some sand traps laying ahead of us, and the liberals will fall into them, and we will no longer be on the scene. On Wednesday, I talked about March Madness, college football, or basketball rather, and that's been going on, and this past week, and that's a good thing. Having sports does turn our attention to sports rather than all the bad things happening in our world, and that's always a good thing. But it's short term. It's not a permanent solution, but it does help things take off. So, the best solution would be to turn to God and pray. Because why? He keeps His promises. On Thursday, I had a Bible talk, and I reminded the people that God is able to do what is required. When God makes a promise, He's able to do it. You have a need, you take it to God, and He is quite capable of handling it. There's nothing that He can't do. He won't do that which is evil. It's against His nature. But there's nothing that He can't do that is in agreement with His holiness. So, I hope that you've enjoyed this. And right down below here, you will click on there and subscribe to this channel, TR Independent Books. And when you do that, you get two things. You get Christian news and views, which you're watching right now. Plus, you get my other podcast, Becoming a Published Author is Fun. And by the way, that is not only fun, a good title, but it's because being a published author is fun, but it's also fun for me to do that particular podcast. I enjoy doing it. Because why? Because it's my way of helping other people. I give out free advice. Capital F, capital R, capital E, capital E. Free. Free. You don't pay me a thing for it. Yes, I sell a writing course, but that's not it's not marketed there other than mentioning that it's the sponsor of that podcast. Same thing with ministry publishing. That is one in which that is one of the sponsors of that podcast. But that is not either one of those. Those are simply the sponsors. You don't buy anything from me there. Now, when you do subscribe, you are encouraging me. And when you do that, it makes me want to do and to keep my promise to you that I'm going to do everything in my power to create episodes that will inform, encourage, and inspire you. That is my promise to you. Every episode I make, that promise is front and center. And by the way, another promise I do is you have the freedom of making comments. Um, Try to keep them civil. If you disagree, please do. Let me know and keep it civil. And give me reasons why you disagree. I'll look them up. You might be right. That's always a possibility. I don't claim to be um, always right. Uh, what I do claim to do is I will look things up, and I'll either comment there in the comments, or I will maybe do it in a episode such as this. So you have a great day, and I will see you in the next episode.